You are listening to Draw 4 Podcast. Good tidings, and thanks for joining us. I am Joseph Dunlap, executive producer of Draw 4 Podcast and Player 4 Podcast.
I'm James Kelly. I'm a senior communications and new media student at Shepherd University, part of the production team here for Draw 4.
And I'm Anastasya Uskova. Professionally, I am an attorney, but I do 3D card alters as a very intense hobby of mine. And with regards to Magic, I primarily play draft, limited events, and standard.
Actually, it's Anastasia that we're going to be talking to a lot here because she's a card alterist. So we're kind of doing a format here that's sort of an interview, but it's also focused just on the card alter community itself. So it's a feature on that as well. How we did this was I have some questions I wanted to ask her, and James has some questions he's prepared as well. So we're just going to take turns with our questions, and then we'll move on to the lightning round. So my first question is, how big is the card alter community? Because manalink.com, who I write for, hosts a huge card alter community Facebook group, but I don't know the actual scope of the community.
Well, I mean, it's huge. If you're familiar with the Facebook group, you'd know that it has over 13,000 members, and there's people joining almost every day. And that's just the people that are part of the Facebook group. There's tons of other groups online. On Reddit, there's a bunch of artists who post. There's lots of local offline artists too. I'm pretty sure that every shop has some alterists that work with the shop or, work through the shop. It's a very popular kind of way to interact with Magic and kind of personalize the game.
What is your favorite alter that you have done?
Oh, okay. So this was a really hard question for me because I do the alters because I love the Magic art. It's just, when I got into Magic, it was because I really fell in love with the art. I think my favorite one, and I think the one that got a lot of people kind of to follow me, was an Unholy Holy Strength box topper that I made with Therese Nielsen's art. And I used some foil cards, and I used the regular cards, and I layered it all up so that the Unholy Strength art, if you're familiar with it, is the demonic man warrior holding his sword downward, and then the Holy Strength is the angelic warrior holding his sword upward. And I had one above the other, so it looked like they were putting their swords into one another. So it's just a really great piece. I have to say my second favorite, I can't choose because they're all just so great, is I did a Brothers Yamazaki. I mean, I love Ron Spears. He's just a fantastic artist. And the brothers are so flavorful. As you know, they're the uncommon legendary creatures from Kamigawa block, and they're the only legendary creatures in the game that can be out as a pair. And they have the effect where if they're both out, they both get +2/+2. And then there's two alternate arts for them. So I got both of the alternate arts, and I did a 3D rendition of them. And I extended everything as well. I did a full art on them, and I extended their weapons, and it became just this wonderful display piece. But those have got to be my favorites. I mean, they just were really great. And then I do want to have a shout out for another artist of mine. My favorite artist to 3D is by far Wayne Reynolds. He does a lot of work for Magic, and he does a lot of work for other card games and other tabletop games, and even Hearthstone. You can probably see him if you play. His work is all over the place, but he's just fantastic because he has such a crisp, distinct kind of style to his work that's really great for 3Ding.
So my next question is, how close of a community are the card alterists?
Well, I think they're pretty close. We get a lot of people who come in and they kind of dabble, and then they leave, but if you stick around, you'll get to know everybody. People's work becomes very easily recognizable. I think everybody who keeps altering really develops their own distinct style. I mean, even though the Facebook group is huge, there's definitely a very recognizable group of alterists, and I feel like everyone's kind of very familiar with one another. So I'd say they're pretty close. It's a pretty close community, even given its size.
Given the whole community standard of everything, and you had said about people wanting to dabble into it, what would you consider some advice would be for someone that would be wanting to look into starting to do alters?
Well, the first thing I'd say is it's a great idea. One of the reasons I love alters, and I tend to get really competitive when I play, but one of the reasons I absolutely love alters is because it's not a win or lose. You come in and you just do it, and it'll look good. I think that if you keep trying and keep working at it, it'll look good. So anybody who wants to really, I guess, do something meaningful with Magic really should try out altering. Even if you don't feel like you're artistically inclined, there's lots of different alters that you could do, and I'm not very much of a painter. That's why I got into 3D alters. So that's the first thing I would say is give it a shot. Definitely give it a shot. Don't consider yourself out of the game because you're not a professional artist. The second thing I would say is once you start, give yourself some time to get accustomed to it, to accustomed to using your tools. Don't jump right into, $40 cards. Get a little practice in, and don't get frustrated if you're not really getting the exact results you want. I mean, altering is a game of patience. You have to give yourself the time to kind of get good.
Well, it definitely reminds me of learning an instrument or anything like that. It just takes practice, patience, and a lot of hard effort and going forth into it.
Yeah, it's true. It's absolutely true. When I started doing 3D alters, I do still have my first few 3D alters, and I don't show them to anybody because I just tore up the cards. It was inevitable. I used just junky commons that I had. But, it was inevitable, and the key is not to quit at that point and keep trying. And, I guess that takes me to the last point, is if you're part of a community like the Facebook group, and I recommend that anybody who gets into altering should join the group because there's so many great resources and inspiration there. The only thing is you're going to see a lot of artists who are just mind-boggling. They're just so good. They're literally creating masterpieces on this little 3.5 by 5 inch card, and it can be a little disheartening. But like I said, it's not really a competition with anybody else. You're really fighting with yourself to get better. And so don't get disheartened looking at just all of the amazing artists out there. You just keep doing it, keep trying, and eventually you'll get your own style and you'll be among the ranks of the elite on the Facebook group. So that's what I have to say.
My next question is, who are your favorite card alterists?
Oh, man. Well, I have to say there's, Klug's, as you know, family name. Just everybody, household name there. On the Facebook group, though, there's just some really great iconic styles. Some of my favorites are Marta Molina. She does these gorgeous landscape art swaps. And then Federico Fiori, he actually joined the group probably, I'd say fairly recently, but he's just got the most unique style, and he's got some fantastic use of color. He's just brilliant. He's a brilliant illustrator. Then I'm also a big fan of Kevin LePage. He does these really neat full art foil and foil peel alters, and I think he was one of the first people to start actually gilding foil cards. So he'll take gold leaf and various precious metals, and he will gild a card, like the borders of a card. I just thought that was a great way to make something really special, that much more special. And he's worked on some very, very expensive foils, so those are always great to see. And of course, there's so many. Fabian Serra's great, one of my favorites. Brandon Brown with Modfly Alters is constantly putting out fantastic work. And then Tan Weirong Ben with Bantistic Alters does some really neat marker alters. I think he uses some sort of like Copic markers, and he just creates incredibly detailed alters. But those are just a few. I'd say there's talent popping up every day on the Facebook group. I couldn't list them all if I tried.
I would actually probably have to say I have a few notes here. I have 3 favorite artists that I've actually encountered for alters. Klug Alters, that's a good one. All Time Wonders, and then Evil Nerd Inc. Those are 3 that I've seen a lot of stuff on YouTube about, and I really like their work.
Oh, yeah. Klug's, I think, a household name when it comes to alters. He's just really well known.
Yeah, just a bit.
It's true. He just produces great stuff. It's really hard to argue with his popularity because he really backs it up with the quality of his work. All Time Wonders, I see a lot on the Facebook group. They're pretty great. I haven't heard of the third one, but do they do speed paintings on YouTube? Because I know that's really popular.
They sometimes do speed paintings, but most of the time their videos are like 20 minutes, 13 minutes long, something like that.
Wow. That's really cool. I'll have to check them out. I love adding new inspiration to my group of inspiring alterists.
Just to add towards the whole alters thing, for artists and stuff, it definitely seems like whenever you're like, oh yeah, I like this person, this person, this person, and it's just like, okay, I think I've got the broad scope of everyone. It's just like, oh hey, who are these new people?
Exactly.
All right, so my next question is gonna be, do you sell your work and or take commissions at all?
I do. I do sell my work and I do take commissions, but I'm on a break right now. I have to say, my 3D alters take an incredible amount of time to do. I'm actually very envious of folks who do painted altars because once you get really good at those, you can start cranking them out. But I can't cut any faster. I've got a razor sharp X-Acto blade and
You're stuck whittling down and then you're just like, I can only go so fast.
It's true. I mean, and the interesting thing is, the better you get, the more time it takes because the more detail you want to pull out of the altar. So I'm just stuck there making 50-piece altars, and I'll talk a little bit about just the process of it. But yeah, it takes so long. So I usually just take one commission at a time, and it takes me about 2 weeks to finish one. Just for the holiday season, I had to take a little break and finish up some personal projects.
Okay, so my next question is about the process of creating cards. I don't mean so much give us a step-by-step guide, because those exist. My question is more about the checklist of things that a card alterist would have to be careful about when doing their altar so that the card still meets the wizard's guidelines.
So that's a very touchy subject, especially in the alterist, any alterist forum or community, because you're always going to have people come in and they're going to say, I want you to alter my Liliana of the Veil, but she needs to be tournament legal. Or, I want you to alter my Tarmogoyf, but it needs to be tournament legal. And the first thing I have to say is, no artist worth their salt will ever guarantee you tournament legality, because it's just one of those things that it's always up to the head judge. Usually there's a certain group of altars that are good, but, most of the time, but, if you get a touchy head judge, they have the final word and they can decide to kick an altar out. So that's just something to always be kind of aware of. In terms of just things to watch out for paint alterists, one of the biggest things that kind of flies under the radar is paint thickness. So when you're putting any sort of material on a card, you want to make sure that in a sleeve, the card is still the same, more or less the same thickness as all the other cards in your deck. If you start globbing on paint and it starts getting kind of, you can kind of feel it through the sleeve, then the head judge might say that that's a marked card and they'll have to ask you to switch it out. So that's actually a big hurdle for a lot of new alterists, is getting the thickness of paint down. Because between the base layer and all the other layers that you put on, and the quality or the type of paint you use, you end up with kind of a crusty kind of look. And that's just something that alterists really have to work on. Other than that, there's really nothing. Nothing other than the type of altar itself that might keep it from being legal. And as far as I know, Wizards hasn't had a problem with people altering the cards.
It's interesting, and I'm sorry, James, but she actually moved on to my next question, so I get to ask it now. Which is, I was going to ask, how often is it an issue that the tournament organizer says, no, you can't use this card?
I've seen it happen a couple of times, so I can kind of break down generally, and this is, of course, like I said before, check with the head judge, but generally, if the card's name, mana cost, power toughness, if it has one, are visible, and the art is recognizable, then the altar is generally allowed to be played in a tournament level. Now, what that means is that altars such as a border extension, they're good. Altars where you have like a figure and it's kind of extended a little bit over the nameplate or the type plate. So, for instance, this is a very popular one. If you have a character holding a sword and the tip of the sword is extended over the nameplate, so it kind of looks like it's popping out of the art box, that's okay too, because again, the name, the mana cost, and the power toughness is visible. And the other kind of altar that's generally all right is it's called a full art altar. Basically, the art is extended into the text box, so it's a textless altar. Those are fine as long as if it's a creature, the power toughness is still visible. And the reason is because, well, as we know, Wizards prints textless altars all the time. Cryptic Command comes to mind.
Pyroclasm.
So, Pyroclasm, exactly. There's a lot of very text-heavy altars that have textless copies of them. So that's generally fine. But as soon as you get into covering the name, covering the mana cost, any sort of art swapping. So I know some people like to mess around and they'll put like island art on a forest. That is not going to be tournament legal. Any sort of addition of characters, anything like that generally is probably not going to be tournament legal. And then the other thing is any sort of art, peel alters probably also will not be tournament legal. If you're taking, I know this is very popular with the commanders, you take an oversized commander and you peel the foil off, you peel the foil layer off and you kind of trim it and then you paste it onto a regular sized commander card. So it looks like the art is incredibly large. But that would not be tournament legal because that's considered a marked card from what I understand. I've heard of some head judges being alright with it if it's done very, very carefully and it's barely noticeable, but I'd say that's probably going to be the exception and not the rule.
Okay, James, you will get to ask your final 2 questions in a row because I got to do back-to-back questions, and then we're going to move immediately into the lightning round.
Okay, no problem. Let's go with this one. A card that you would love to do an alter for.
Well, you know, 3D altering, it's always the cost of it. That's the big hurdle. Because, I mean, I'm cutting up cards, right? They're going from usable to useless in a lot of people's eyes. So I try not to cut up any cards that are over $1 or so for that reason, because I've had some people rage. Even at just a common, you know, like, oh, why would you do that to a card? So just because, personally, I love the art, and because I think that the shock value would be amazing. If they ever print the Black Lotus with the online art, I would be honored to turn that into a 3D life counter.
As long as somebody else ate the cost.
Yeah, happy about that.
There you go. Hey, I could probably do it with only 6 copies.
Yeah, no big deal.
Yeah, just make a house payment, why don't you?
There you go, right?
I think you had made an foreshadowed into this earlier. What got you interested in doing alters?
Well, I started playing Magic, and I would see, you know, alters occasionally online. And then one day I saw someone posted an album of Sashiro Ukubo's work. And he's a Japanese 3D alterist. I think he's considered the pioneer of 3D alters. His stuff is just very clean, and he does the 3D alters where he'll actually he'll have the same layer but just a little bit different, so it'll look like it's kind of got like a reflection below it. So he'll layer the cards and he'll just change the upper layer a little bit and he'll just keep layering them like that. And I saw his work and I was just blown away. And I have a graphic design background, so I have a ton of X-Acto knives and glue and paint and all kinds of tools. So I thought, you know what, that's really cool. And then I looked up some guides, and then a pretty famous 3D alterist, Andrew Site, who worked for, I think, Star City Games. He did a lot of great guides on 3D altering, and he actually did a Kiki-Jiki 3D alter, speaking of expensive cards. But he got to do some... Yes. the pack one, not the promo one, too, so it was really crazy.
Ooh.
So he did one of those, and it was a great inspiration too. So they kind of were the reason I got into it. And then, of course, once I found out about 3D altering, I joined the 3D altering Facebook page run by Ed Geis, and he's put out a lot of really great guides. He's been doing 3D alters for years now. So, and he was kind of very helpful when I was getting started. So that's really the reason I got into it. And it's always just nice after getting completely stomped in a draft to come home and make something beautiful. I can't lose at this.
Some sort of self-comfort is just like, okay, I might as well wallow in my self-pity and just start whittling this piece of wood for a next altar.
There you go, exactly.
Here's something I'm actually good at.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
Maybe that deck I drafted was so ugly, time to make something beautiful.
Yes. I'll cut up my deck for filler. And that's what it gets.
Okay, so moving on to the lightning round. And actually, there are no lightning round questions because we already asked you questions. Instead, we're going to let you highlight a project you have worked on recently or are working on that you're so excited about that you have to tell us about it.
Okay, so I'm going to be making a 3D Ugin. Yes.
What?
Ooh.
Are you talking about...
Awesome.
Yes,
Oh.
I'm going to be making a 3D Ugin. Okay, but I just wanted to shock you guys. It's not going to be the actual card. I'm not going to be cutting up $40 Planeswalker cards. There's this, I was just so excited about this. When Fate Reforged came out, I was sorting through the tokens, because I'm always on the lookout for tokens. They're just fun to collect. And it turns out one of the advertisement cards has a full art, blown up version of Ugin's art. So it's just, the whole card is just Ugin. And it's so detailed and it just looks great. There's almost no text on the card. So my next big project, and this is kind of the reason I took off of commissions, is I'm going to be taking this, I'm going to be extending the wings, so it's going to be an actual full art of Ugin, and I'm going to be making another box topper. I'm looking to get some sort of custom deck box made, some wooden deck box, and I'll be fitting this 3D altar into the lid, so it'll be like this, almost like a jewelry box for a deck kind of a thing, and it's going to have that 3D Ugin on it. It's an incredible project because I'm going to be doing each of the feathers, each of the little spikes on his body. He's very, very detailed, great art, but it's going to be a hell of a project, so it'll be really fun.
It sounds it.
Yeah, that sounds like a really awesome project. I didn't even know about those little inserts. I'm going to have to try and find that artwork so I can see what you're talking about. Ugin is the bomb, so...
No, exactly. And the thing with the inserts is I was spending all my time collecting during Fate Reforged and Dragons. Thankfully, it was in Dragons too, and I went to, I think it was GP Vegas. Maybe it was some GP, but basically I was just rushing around and collecting these inserts whenever I saw them because you can't order them because everyone just tosses them whenever they see them. So I've got this pile of about 100 of them ready to go, so it's really exciting.
So you might make multiples?
I don't know. I really try to stay away from making multiples of my 3D work because I want each piece to feel unique. Usually I'll only do multiples of tokens, but even then, once I do a batch, I'm done, so...
It's like, how much of your sanity do you want to have left?
I know, exactly. Oh my gosh. I think I spent, on the Brothers Yamazaki I was talking about, I think I spent about 40 hours on each brother. And,
oh, wow.
I mean, every single little piece of armor, I love doing armor, but that was just something else. I mean, oh my gosh.
Anastasia, if you have any parting words, maybe advice for card alterists or advice for people wanting to get into maybe having a card altered, any parting words, any advice that you wanted to share, then this would be your chance.
Well, I think that with the Christmas season and the holiday season coming, I think that trying your hand at altars is a great way to make some relatively inexpensive gifts. If you go to the Facebook page, and I recommend anyone who's interested in altars join the Facebook page, you can look around, get some ideas. I saw some really neat Sharpie altars where someone just kind of cell shaded some of the art and it came out really nice, almost like a comic book style. I've seen people do really simple extensions of cards that make the card look that much better. So if you're looking for, gifts to give your Magic friends and you just don't want to spend, $60 on fetches for their standard deck, you can always get them some altered basic lands. And make those as a gift. And it's always very thoughtful because it's something very personal. So I suggest anybody, if anyone wants to get into altering, now's the time to give it a shot because it might save you a lot of money on gifts.
But don't commission Anastasia. She's busy.
I'm busy. I am so busy.
Yeah.
And with that, we move on to the community question. This week, our community question is, if you could have the art of any Magic the Gathering card altered, what would you change about it? And each of us is going to get 15 seconds to answer. So I will start.
Ooh.
Actually, if I were to change the art of any card, it would probably be Lantern of Insight, because I'm a modern player somewhat, and I'm a horrible person, so I play Lantern. And I think I would do something cool with it, make it look extra shiny or something. I don't know, maybe have a hand, like, picking it up. James, what would you do?
Just thinking about it immediately off the top of my head, I would say Doomblade. As simple and as timeless as that card is, I definitely think some new art is needed for that, and not just the textless flavor art that is floating around. That's like $13, $14 now, if I remember correctly. It definitely needs a new art in and of itself.
Anastasia, for you specifically, what card would you have altered simply so you could play with it?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, I'm a big Dragons fan. I love dragons. And so I think I'd probably get Scion of Dragon altered so that it looks incredibly badass. I can't quite say what that exactly would look like, but I think it would probably be something Smog-like.
Oh, cool.
Or maybe like multi-headed dragon. Just
That'd be
something
awesome.
something amazing, because that card is so cool, but I can't say that the art is my favorite.
I have an additional answer here. I'm cheating, and I'm not actually answering the question, but I actually have, for a while, thought it would be really cool if I ever played Splinter Twin, and if it was like a deck that I felt like was here to stay, would never get banned, and I would play it from here till the day I die, then I would have the artwork of all the important cards for Splinter Twin changed to make it look like it's clone troopers from Star Wars.
That'd be cool.
And so you would have an individual clone for Pestermite and Deceiver Exarch, but then with Kiki-Jiki and Splinter Twin, you would have like a battalion of them. It'd be really cool.
That sounds awesome.
And then have...
Too bad they wouldn't hit anything.
Yeah, no, they're clone troopers. They can't hit things. The stormtroopers are not clones. But I could also have altered art of basic lands, and then it could be maybe some locations for where the clone troopers would have fought from the cartoon. So that's just something I have thought about for a while. It's just it would be a huge effort for a deck I don't even play and don't ever plan to play. If you have an answer for the community question, a card that you would alter if you had the ability to do so and money was no object and you intended to play the card, then leave us a comment. If you are listening to us on YouTube, then leave us a comment on YouTube. If you're listening on SoundCloud, leave us a comment on SoundCloud. If you clicked on here from manaleak.com, then leave us a comment on manaleak.com, or else just find us on social media and leave us a comment. So now what we get to do is we get to all say our social media where we can be found.
All right. I'm usually on Facebook most of the time. I actually have two. My personal page, which is facebook.com/JPK51379. And then I also have a page for my artwork that I do as a hobby. It's facebook.com/abstractmarcher paintings and drawings. I'm also at Twitter at abstractmarcher, and then also on DeviantArt, abstractmarcher.deviantart.com.
You can find me on Facebook. That's primarily where I post my stuff. It's Form and Function 3D Alters. And then the same on Tumblr. I have just a little photo blog going there, which is also Form and Function 3D Alters.
And then I hope by now you know who I am. But if you've forgotten, you can find me on Twitter at Joseph_Dunlap. And you can find me on Facebook. I'm always posting to the Magic the Gathering group. This week I posted a link to an article that I published on Mana Lake, as well as a bunch of silly little ads I did where Jace was endorsing Pantene and Liliana was endorsing Maybelline. And then I did one today where Soren was a ladies' man and he was advertising Old Spice. Look at your card. No back to me. And so you'll always find me on the Facebook group. Draw 4 Podcast, you can find us on Player 4 Podcast's YouTube account, which is youtube.com/c/Player4 Podcast. You can find us on SoundCloud at /draw-4-podcast. Twitter, we use the Player 4 Podcast account, which is just at Player 4 Podcast. And our email address is player4podcast@gmail.com. You can find us on iTunes if you are not currently listening to us on iTunes. And you just search for Draw 4 Podcast and we'll be there, and it'll be a nice little Christmas present. This has been Draw 4 Podcast. Until next time, we wish you good fortune, and may you draw well.